Welcome. Today is December 30th, 2024. It is 5:30 and we are in the Bosch Freilich Meeting Room, Mandan City Hall. City Administrator Neubauer, could you please take the roll?
Commissioners Heinchan,
Here.
Braun,
Here.
Rohr,
Here.
Schoberg,
Here.
Mayor Freilich.
Here. Tonight we're going to have Mandan Police Chief Jason Ziegler lead us in the national anthem, or not the national anthem.
Boy, it's going to be an interesting national
Yes, it
anthem.
is. Pledge of Allegiance. Let's try that one.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next week we'll do the national anthem. Announcements. I'm going to let Commissioner Heinchan talk about Christmas in the Park.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just encourage all residents to come down to the park at Dykeshorn Park for the next 30 some days here. The park will be open every evening for the holiday lights on Main, and there's some new attractions, some new exhibits lit up, so some changes from last year, and I encourage everybody to come check it out. A lot of fun down there over the last few nights, so thank you.
Thank you. And please patronize the Mandan businesses. Commissioners, you have the agenda in front of you. Any changes? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Braun, a second by Commissioner Schoberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioners Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. On to the minutes. You've had a chance to review the minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 19th?
I make a motion to approve the November 19th, 2004 minutes of the commission meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Rohr, a second by Commissioner Heinchan. Any further discussion? Second by Commissioner Braun. Excuse me. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioners Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item F, which is a public hearing. It is the final presentation and consideration of the Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Andrew?
Good evening, Mayor Freilich and Commissioners. I'm here to introduce a few folks who will be taking this item for the rest of the evening. The Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan is a relatively major transportation planning document that's been prepared in conjunction with a couple different local entities, primarily coordinated by the Bismarck-Mandan Metropolitan Planning Organization. Its general purpose is to outline some transportation planning priorities, ideas, and recommended projects and costs that can be useful for future grant applications as we grow and expand and update our transportation network. Again, just to make sure I'm getting my points, we've been working on the project for well over a year and a half. I'll be introducing Jason Carby from HDR Consulting to take it from where I leave off to the rest. However, he'll kind of cover an outline of the study's preparation, how public input and priorities were factored in, as well as the kind of general overarching goals and development themes that surrounded the document's creation. For background info, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this plan at its October 28th meeting. It's recommending acceptance of the MTP, and tonight the MPO is requesting that the Board of City Commissioners do approve the Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan via resolution. So with this item, after I hand it off to Jason, he'll run through a presentation. We do need to have a public hearing, as it was advertised as a public hearing, and the resolution of adoption is included under Resolutions and Ordinances number 1 in your packet. If there aren't any other questions for me, I'll introduce Jason Carby from HDR. Kim Ripple from the Bismarck-Mandan MPO is also here as well if any questions come up. The three of us, Jarek as well, are able to answer those. Thank you, Jason.
All right, and hopefully here in a second, you'll be able to see some slides. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Basically, the agenda tonight is I'm going to do a very brief presentation on the long-range transportation plan. I'm going to go through kind of the content of the document itself, but we'll be open to any questions you might have at the end, and we can go into more depth on anything you see up here. But I'll try to keep it pretty high level and brief. So we had 11 chapters, and I'm going to kind of walk through all of those as part of this the presentation. This is one of, and I think Andrew did a good job kind of teeing this up, but this is one of kind of the main documents that the Metropolitan Planning Organization and its partner jurisdictions are required to put together every 5 years. Basically, this is the Arrive 2050 plan, so meaning we are looking out to the year 2050. You know, some of those shorter term, you know, projects and issues we have a better focus on and know kind of the things that we really need to address in that shorter term. Longer term, it's starting to get kind of some ideas together. What are those longer term issues we might be coming across, and then, you know, how do we kind of start planning for some of these longer term projects. One of the key things to note is this is for all modes of transportation. So for, you know, driving cars, bikes, buses, pedestrians. It's also fiscally constrained, which essentially we need to have a reasonable, the projects that show up on that fiscally constrained list need to be reasonably fundable. So we went through a process, and again, there's some federal guidelines that we need to follow, and there's some federal goals, but the nice thing about this process is it really has a local flavor. You know, we talked with the public, we talked with local planning and engineering jurisdictions, you know, so Andrew and Jarek got involved, and so really got an idea of what the, you know, the local desires for that framework of that plan ought to be. Identified 8 overarching goal areas that kind of help shape the plan. And really had a very kind of rigorous public engagement process, had both online and in person, had public open houses on both sides of the river throughout this process, especially at 3 major milestones as we went through it. But also, you know, had a stakeholders committee, so also a steering committee, so a lot of the technical staff from, you know, City of Mandan, City of Bismarck, all kind of came together and agreed on, you know, plan, construction, and direction as we walk through this. There's a chapter on, you know, kind of the trends, you know, how is the community changing, some of that growth we've had historically and how that might look going forward, but from a transportation perspective and just kind of a people and housing perspective as well. One of the more meaty chapters is the baseline transportation system performance, and we got into all these different perspectives of looking at congestion, safety, you know, connectivity, all kinds of different, you know, where's the system today? And so looked at, you know, safety trends and crashes, both from a, you know, where are the highest crash locations, but also, you know, what are the trends for the entire region? Looking at serious and fatal crashes, those crashes we're really trying to eliminate through this process. Looking at areas of congestion, you know, where they're at today, but also recognizing that they're starting to emerge in the future. And then kind of summary, I think one of the big things that's always kind of come up every 5 years is the need for that cross-area travel and to really identify those future corridors. On the Mandan side, really that need for good contiguous east-west travel. How do we have those corridors where we can really get from, you know, West Mandan to East Mandan a little bit more efficiently, or northwest to southeast? But those are some of the like long-term projects we start laying out as a part of this process. So also part of this is looking to the future. So by 2050, we really anticipate, you know, a 30 to 40% growth in population, households, and jobs. And we kind of looked at where a lot of that growth area would be focused through this process for both households and future employment locations. And then took that information about future growth and really focused on, okay, how is that going to affect how we travel as a community? And so started looking at, you know, some of those high growth areas. And, you know, you can see in North Mandan, you know, through the interstate system through there, a lot of growth anticipated to occur through all that. So, but again, this translated in all this growth in travel and, you know, how long it takes to get from point A to point B. And so this is really the foundation of identifying existing issues and future issues and those things that, you know, we're trying to address. And so through the process, we would take, an issue popped up here. What kind of strategy should we consider and test and kind of identify maybe and help prioritize that might go into the plan. And so Through that process, we've got this range of different projects from different modal perspectives. We've got some big projects up here. We've got like a 38th connection up there. We've got the North Bridge crossing, potential new interchange west of Mandan, and the potential extension of Mackenzie. So, a lot of different types of projects were considered. One of the key things as we go through this is understanding that it has to be fiscally constrained. And so a lot of, when you look at how transportation revenues have increased historically compared to transportation costs, purchasing power really has historically gone down, and we anticipate it to continue to go down in the future. And so as we go through this, that really can constrain, which of those projects go into that fiscally constrained bin of projects. That being said, some of these might be great, if additional funding comes along, or if there's a grant opportunity, something like that. Some of these projects we're not discarding, but we're keeping them on we call it a vision list or an illustrative project list. But the fiscally constrained plan, I took a couple notes on some of the projects, but so we've got basically some improvements down on 3rd Street South. We've got Sunset, 8th, and 37th up there for potential growth areas. I know one of the interesting things was with so much growth in North Mandan, when we didn't build out that grid of connecting to Sunset, connecting to 37th, connecting to 8th, we had a lot of growth on 1806. And so we basically took care of a lot of those issues by just building a nice contiguous kind of grid roadway system, street system up there. We've also got some side path or trail projects, both taking care of existing trails and building potential new trails, and some maintenance type projects as well on that list. And then the last chapter is basically just demonstrating that federal compliance, how we took this locally crafted plan and kind of met the criteria to meet those federal regulations. That is a very high level summary of a year and a half and 150-page document. So I guess with any questions that you might have, we could answer those.
Mayor, what is your first name, please?
Jason Carby.
Jason, okay,
Yep.
Jason. In looking at this 25 years,
Yeah.
Is that a presumption that the automobile will be the continuing use for people where, families have 1, 2 automobiles and increase, so everything is based, parking, streets around the automobile. Is the automobile going to be the conveyance?
Yeah.
15, 20, 25 years down the road?
Yeah, so that's why we do this every 5 years. And that's a great question, because there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, by the time you get to 2050, right? And so a lot of those shorter term projects are things that we kind of start seeing those needs pop up now. So, they've got basically capital programs set right now that'll get us through about the year 2029. That first 5 years of this plan that gets us to about 2034, 2035. Those are probably some of the most certain years. And so those short-term projects that we're showing on this list, are likely going to be needed here in the short term. We start getting to that midterm and the long term, there's a lot of uncertainty. Modes of travel, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles that drive themselves by 2050, are they going to be everywhere? Those are great questions. If you'd asked us 10 years ago, we would have said that the autonomous vehicles would probably be very, very present everywhere right now, and they are a little bit, but not nearly as much. So admittedly, this is a great exercise to go through as a community to start kind of figuring out what your values are and where you ought to start thinking about long-term investments. But there is some uncertainty, as you get further out there. But generally, yes, the current patterns are anticipated to continue and grow into the future. That's kind of the best we know.
My horizon anyway.
Yeah, right? Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Jason, first of all, thank you very much for all your diligence and hard work. And I really appreciate your emphasis on safety being first and foremost in all this many, many different areas of study. You also, Andrew mentioned that because through your hard work, your committee's hard work, we will be able together to identify long-term itemized improvement forecasting, and therefore, by default, should theoretically be better prepared to apply for and possibly receive additional federal funding for these projects?
Yeah. So part of the process really was when we went back to these goal areas is as we went through, sorry, I'm going to go back a couple slides. Thank you. So some of these are very much federal emphasis areas, but we really locally tailored them. But as we go through and identify projects, we can kind of flag which ones meet some of these critical federal areas that might be the best candidates for federal grants. There's, lots of different programs for, there's safety programs, there's access to jobs type programs, there's, economic development, more focused ones. So you kind of go through that list and kind of match up those projects with that focus. But again, we've got this, we've got this whole list of projects. Not all of them made the fiscally constrained list. Doesn't mean they're not great ideas, but some of them are pretty high dollar type projects. And so that's where it's that opportunity to say, hey, we know it's going to give us this benefit, and this benefit. Can we find some additional funding knowing how those benefits fit in with both, local, federal, and state priorities?
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. One more. Because this does reach out to 2050 and places and closets in between, by considering this plan that we've been involved with, from what I understand, many years already. So this is basically a reboot for the future 5 years up to 2050.
Yep.
I think it's important for our citizens to understand that this is a pre-plan and that the city of Mandan is not necessarily locked in financially to any of these concepts or proposed safety enhancements.
That's correct. Yeah. Yep. No, what we're showing on that fiscally constrained list will change and be amended probably over these 5 years, depending on funding availability and things like that. That happens all the time. But this is our best current estimate of what that program could look like. But every 5 years it gets revisited, like you said. And even in between those 5 years, there can be some adjustments within there.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. We've learned a lot here in the last 6 months. And one of the primary focal points is that whenever we in the city of Mandan do something, it's not just because we have an idea and we want to get it done. I mean, my gosh, with this one, we're out to 2050. There's other plans that go out to, 2040, definitely 2030, and so on. So we just want our citizens at home to understand that this stuff is all long range, and even the 2030 stuff, if it comes to fruition, right, most of us aren't going to be sitting here anymore. But we have to lay that groundwork so that we can watch the markets, if you will, and prepare for funding opportunities and viability of the recommendations that you folks come up with. So thank you very much, everyone sitting here, because I learned today it's not just one or two people, it's pretty much everybody that's sitting here. So for sure. Thank you very much.
Mr. Carby, can you give the people out there a brief description of how you came to be, how the MPO came to be, how is it funded? Is the program federally mandated? How does the MPO associate with the city of Mandan, Bismarck?
So yeah, the MPOs, I believe, so metropolitan planning organizations are federally designated for any urbanized area over 50,000 population. They go back to, I want to say, the 1960s. There was a movement for kind of regional coordination and planning. And so it's a process that's intended to be cooperative across boundaries because, streets, trails bus service don't end at a political jurisdiction. So that was really the spirit that created them. They are federally required. The governor of each state kind of, once they meet a certain thresholds, basically says, okay, you are now an MPO. Minot became a new one after the 2020 census this year. So they crossed that 50,000 threshold. So that's the fourth one in the state now. And so they basically are that where all of the jurisdictions come together. They are made up of the policy board. So the representation from Lincoln, Bismarck, Burleigh County, Mandan, and Morton County. And then transit providers and the DOT kind of all come together and are the policy board essentially. And so they're the decision-making body for how federal transportation dollars that come into the area are distributed. Kim, anything else you would add? Okay, so so Mandan is part of the MPO.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Thank you, Jason.
Thank you all.
At this time, we will open up the public hearing for comments. Are there any comments? Second call for comments. Third call for comments. Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. I would ask the commissioners to move to agenda item K1. Consider a resolution of adoption for the ARRIVE 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Andrew?
Mayor Freilich, if I may, the recommendation of staff and the MPO is to adopt the resolution that's in the agenda packet. If you have any questions, I can take them, as can Kim.
No questions?
I'll make a motion for approval of ARRIVE 2050, the 2025 through 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan by resolution of adoption.
I second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Heinchan, a second by Commissioner Schoberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Agenda item H. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Schoberg, a second by Commissioner Heinchan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Heinchan, Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Schoberg,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. We'll move on to agenda item J. Consider acceptance of final report for safe routes to service complete street study. Andrew.
Mayor Freilich, commissioners, back for another introduction. Over the course of the last year or so, again with the assistance and coordination of the Bismarck Mandan MPO, the city did participate in the creation of the Safe Routes to Services study. In years past, the city has approved plans such as the school crossing safety study. That plan focused on providing clear and safe routes in and around schools. This is similar, however, primarily geared towards commercial or human services within the community, given the need for intergenerational safe routes to services in schools and things like that in our community. I'll be introducing Mike Bittner from Bolton and Make Consulting for the presentation of the Safe Routes to Services plan, for which we are asking the board's acceptance. If there are any questions on this plan, I'm happy to help with them, as can Mike, Kim Ripple with the MPO, Jarek O'Reilly with our engineering staff. So with that, I will introduce Mike, who I believe is online virtually. Mike?
Can everybody hear me and see my screen okay?
We can hear you.
Is
And
Andrew, you see
DMA
my
is
screen okay?
DMA is going to fix the screen here.
Let me know when you're able to see it. Okay. See it on the screen now. Well, I appreciate it. Before I get started, I did want to give a quick shout out to Andrew and Jarek at the city, as well as Kim from the MPO. I work regionally all over the place, and I can tell you, you all are very lucky to have very talented, insightful folks helping you every single day. So with that, I want to introduce the intent of this overall project. And so the intent is the Safe Routes to Services study intends to aid in developing a comprehensive, integrated, multimodal transportation network to allow for safe travel within the communities of Bismarck and Mandan for all users, including those populations of a traditionally underserved, vulnerable, disabled, or disadvantaged status. We had 3 key phases to this process. Phase 1 was investigate issues. Phase 2, identify alternatives. And phase 3 was implement strategies. Overall, the groups that we had special interest to this overall study were groups that had historically not been engaged very well through the previous transportation planning process, not just really locally, but kind of nationally. And so as we start to look at those populations, you can see a map of kind of some concentrations throughout the Bismarck-Mandan area. But as we start to look at the actual demographic numbers and breakdown, we see about 9% of our households are below the poverty line regionally, so about almost 4,000 households. About 10% of the population is Native American, so about 10,000 individuals, and about 21% of households have one or more person with a disability, so over 9,000 households. So really of important interest, and a larger percentage than I think a lot of people thought than when we first started this effort. So Safe Routes to Services, unsafe networks, but for who? Who are we trying to focus in on? Between 2018 and 2022, we had 242 pedestrian and bicycle crashes, and 55% were in our highest density neighborhoods of Native American and low income populations, the folks that typically often require to use alternative modes of transportation more often. 26% of our bike and pedestrian crashes did result in a fatality. And as we looked at everybody walking to and from work every morning, we found out it was about 6 times more likely that you would be involved in a crash if you walked or biked than if you drove. On the right side of the screen, you can see a bar chart of historic crashes. And what we found is that, post 2019, we actually saw the overall crashes go down region-wide. However, we actually saw the ped bike crashes per capita increase quite a bit. So you can start to see some of those undertones of safety that we're really emphasizing on trying to relieve through this process. But a really intense stakeholder engagement process throughout this project. I'd say about 50% of our effort was engagement, 50% was technical. Oftentimes you see that number closer to 80 to 90% technical, and then engaging folks along the way. But we really knew that a lot of the issues were things that we weren't going to uncover just using technical analysis. And so lots of engagement efforts, whether that be, really an emphasis on non-technical approaches for folks that may not have regular access to the internet, but also some technical solutions for those regular, regional folks that want to stay engaged. Really, despite being focused on certain populations to really emphasize them, we did want to make sure that this plan was really a benefit to everyone in the community as well. A huge element to this project was our community advisory group, our CAG. We worked directly with the Missouri Valley Coalition for Homeless People, Sacred Pipe Resource Center, YouthWorks, and Ministry on the Margins. We actually dedicated 1% of our budget to these groups. So we paid them for their efforts. They helped organize really fabulous events. And we were able to engage lots of folks as we started to learn what some of those key issues are that we wanted to resolve through this process. And we developed a nice map you can see on the right side of the screen to identify some of those problem areas. We did complement this with a technical approach, really looking at what are the major activity centers, what are those destinations that we really want to get people to and from. We also looked at amenities. Where do we have sidewalks, bike facilities, transit routes? Where do we have major grades that make it difficult for someone that's in a wheelchair to access? And then finally, we looked at barriers. What are those corridors that have really high speeds that are difficult to cross, where we've seen pedestrian and bicycle crashes in the past, and also railroad crossings? And so we rolled that all together and developed some what we call hotspot analysis, where we identified some of those key locations that we wanted to resolve a little bit closer. So we had 3 locations in Mandan and 6 locations in Bismarck. We also looked at priority strategies, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about those after I give an example of our priority infrastructure improvements. So Shady Acres, this is a great example of the intent of this project. If you were to look at just, Jason did an awesome job presenting on the MTP, and those are, how you spend your money through the future and what are the major corridors, and how do you really focus on those important routes. Places like Shady Acres are not typically what is under the lens of a study like that. This is a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of traffic, that has large arterials nearby. But what you find when you look at this from a different lens of how people connect to and from different areas, what you realize is that this area is kind of an island. It's disconnected on every route based either by a railroad track, the interstate, or basically an extension of the interstate as we get onto Maine. And so it makes it very difficult to be able to access to and from there. We're missing sidewalks east and west. We've got a pediatric center that you can't walk to. It's in the top right of the street. Some folks walking on the grass. We also don't have connections north and south to connect those neighborhood streets either. So we looked at a variety of solutions, and some of these aren't massive, super highway improvements that you often think of when you think of transportation projects. But, in the blue, you can see letter A, just simple ideas like connecting the sidewalks. You can see kind of a drawing in the top left of the screen of how do we connect that. We've got some right of way adjacent to Maine there, creating a boulevard, so we have snow storage, but also creating a facility for people to walk east and west. So a pretty simple, basic solution, but in an area that really hasn't been studied or focused on in the past. We also included some bigger picture ideas as well that we've bucketed under long-term improvements, recognizing that we don't have the dollars today to resolve this, but trying to connect those to larger funding pots that was mentioned earlier. So a railroad grade separation for pedestrians that connects the park and the neighborhood to really the rest of the community is one concept that came up through this area. And then finally, through the implementation, the idea was we recognize that our budgets are already stretched very thin. And so looking at solutions like statewide, transportation alternatives grant to be able to pay for the sidewalks, or there's a national reconnecting communities grant that is really designed for communities that are disconnected to be reconnected. And so looking at that as an opportunity for that railroad grade separation. And just flipping through, just another example of 3rd Street, for the sake of time, I'll just kind of flip through this one, but trying to think through where those major barriers are, whether that be by the gas station, whether that be trying to cross the street, or whether that be just underutilized space from really low density parking areas. Really looking for solutions to try to fix some of those smaller scale projects by looking at a short-term approach with kind of lower hanging fruit improvements and a longer term approach as well. We also looked at some, priority strategies. This is one I won't spend a ton of time in. It's really heavily emphasized into Bismarck. It's a high frequency circulator route to some of those most popular destinations that kind of end up in a square space in the center of Bismarck. But one concept that we did recommend for Mandan was a microtransit study for Mandan. One thing we heard from a lot of folks is that our purple route is nice. It gets us into Mandan, but once every 2 hours, that doesn't really line up all the time with jobs, starting and ending. It can be very difficult, if not impossible, to really reliably utilize transit through some of these key corridors throughout Mandan. And so one thing that we're studying actively, for example, in Grand Forks, is microtransit. And what microtransit is, it's tech enabled. It's really designed to live in that space between traditional fixed route transit and ride hailing technology. And so, for example, if you want to get from downtown Mandan to downtown Bismarck, you can call it. It'll pick up a couple folks. It's designed to be cheap and equitable. It may have a couple stops, but it's designed to be able to be a little bit more responsive, so you can plan for it a little bit better to be able to use transit throughout Mandan. And so A lot of things that we haven't studied, an idea that we felt like would be worth studying a little bit closer as you start to think about, was it that or the increased frequency on the purple line for Mandan? We also looked at mobility hub options. And so mobility hubs is a little bit of a catch-all term across the country. It's becoming very popular to develop these hubs, typically built around transit stops, but they're often designed to really coagulate lots of different transportation alternatives. So, if we want to have a bike share connected with a transit stop that's heated, or maybe you've got some bathrooms, or you have lockers. Lockers are probably one of the bigger ones that we heard from the unhoused community, that if I'm going to my job and I've got some stuff and I want to put it there, but I struggle to get all the way to where I need to get to. So looking at opportunities for that, and really bringing those together into one hub allows you to really manage those a little bit better, but also provide better opportunities as well. And so here's a graphical representation of some opportunity sites. So really looking at, one in the downtown Mandan area, maybe there's more opportunities, really trying to connect those with partner agencies that would be able to, maintain and operate some of these solutions a little bit better, but also connect it into our transit system as well. And then finally, we also looked at our complete streets policies as kind of the last element of the overall project, really looking at what those policies would look like, whether that be inclusive design policies, procedures, as well as project selection. That's within the body of the report. But one of the big topics that kept coming up throughout the process was kind of 4 seasons complete streets. What happens when we've got snow on our sidewalks and our trails. And so developing a range of solutions, obviously Mandan does a good job with the golden shovel to kind of trying to build off some of that momentum, but also providing some ideas, whether that be designing for ice and snow, what's your median width to be able to store snowage, to store snow, what is the size of the trail that you could easily clear it with the equipment you have, looking at different opportunities for snow clearing routes, whether that be opt-in assessments that you often see in a downtown or an HOA, or maybe even municipally led priority routes, and identify what those could look like based on the types of services you have, and trying to take some examples from communities around the region. So with that kind of concludes a really fast, high-level overview of the overall plan. In a similar way to Jason, this is a 100-page document that we're trying to capture really fast. So I'm happy to answer any questions that I may have spurred through that conversation.
Any questions?
Mike, on one of your slides, you had looked like the Memorial Highway was highlighted in red, but then the next slide, the target areas were 3rd and Main, and I don't believe that Memorial Highway was indicated as a problem area. Was some of the feedback, that one right there? Yeah. Was there some feedback on Memorial Highway specifically? That's tying into a pretty big project that we're moving on from a safety perspective. So.
Yeah, well said. This is reporting all the feedback we have, but recognizing that a lot of the comments we received on Memorial is about the old Memorial Highway and what it is, and folks not necessarily knowing what the types of improvements are. So certainly an education opportunity as we went through that process, but this graphic still does represent all the comments that we received. So we could certainly unhighlight that if it's a little confusing, but I think people were relieved to understand some of the improvements that are forthcoming along that corridor.
Any further questions for Mike?
Mike, the study at whole encompasses about 400 square miles, according to some of the information that was available to us today, and about 128 to 135,000 people. Now that encompasses, the Lincoln, Bismarck, Mandan, Morton, and Burley geographic. But in Mandan specifically, one of the slides indicated that the north side of Mandan definitely needed some assistance in making enhancing the mobility of our senior citizens, as well as the south side of Mandan. And I can see that our planner and engineer have already looked at some of those areas, Third Street area, and there was a safety issue on the east end of Main Street, and today we were discussing some options for the East Mandan area, or Twin City Drive, just south of that Shady Lane area. So we do have areas in town, regardless of the human demographic, that need to be studied. And Jarek, if you could, or Andrew, what was that terminology? We looked at this several meetings ago. It's, I think, a traffic TA, I think it was.
Yes, the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. So did those concepts that we discussed 3 weeks ago or 3 meetings ago kind of stem from this Safe Routes program?
Absolutely. So yeah, even though it wasn't finalized at that point, I would say our participation in the Safe Routes to Services study gave us really good insight on what would be competitive applications for the TA program. And we put in 4 very, very competitive applications this round, and we'll continue to put competitive applications thanks to, in part, to this study.
So due to the city of Mandan's and early and timely involvement in this, we might stand maybe a little bit better chance in acquiring some grants from the grant pail.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jarek, was there a ranking with those applications?
Yeah, by the Bike Ped subcommittee, there were 6 applications, and ours were ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those were the 4 that we submitted. So
What one was the first one?
it was. Yes. So
It was the bike path?
it was the bike. We ended up exiting the meeting prioritizing the bike path along 1806 as our highest priority, though that wasn't how the Bike Ped subcommittee had prioritized them or had scored them. Yeah.
That was 1806 North?
Yep.
From Eagles Park to...
North of 27th, yeah. Might have been all the way up to 37th. I can't remember. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jarek.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mike or Andrew or Jarek? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept the final report for the Safe Routes for Services Complete Street Study.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Schoberg, a second by Commissioner Brown. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Brown,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. Item number 2, under new business, consider a rapid rectangular flashing beacon design budget amendment. Jarek.
Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Yeah, kind of speaking of safe routes to services, the city had applied for a highway safety improvement program grant in 2019 for improvements, rapid rectangular flashing beacon improvements at 4 locations around the community. The locations, I'm going to bring up a map here so that we can talk over a map a little bit. The 4 locations that we had landed on through coordination with the North Dakota Department of Transportation were at crossing Main Street at Copper Dog. I believe, here we are, at the Copper Dog corner right here, making an improvement there where there would be a rapid rectangular flashing beacon with push button controls, similar to what you see further down the street, like at 4th Avenue Northwest, if I can. So the improvement would be similar to this, where you have the push button controls, beacon comes on, and you can make crossings. So those 4 locations that we had applied for are at Copper Dog, at the southwest corner of St. Joe's, right here, southwest corner of St. Joe's, so 3rd Street Northwest, and Collins Avenue. Right across the street from Custer Elementary, so the corner of First Street Northeast and 6th Avenue Northeast. And then the final location is at right in front of Raging Rivers to cross 46th. The specific improvement in each location is kind of unique to the location. Some of them include bulb outs, some of them don't include bulb outs. All of them include rapid rectangular flashing beacons though. When we applied for this project in 2019, it was estimated to cost about $150,000. Since then, we've discovered that it's going to cost quite a bit more. And along with that effort, we've had kind of increased engineering costs on this. We had included $140,000 budgeted to engineer these improvements between 2024 and 2025. And that's going to end up being $8,000 short, about $8,000 short. But for today, we are asking or requesting and recommending approval of an amendment to our contract with Moore Engineering for the design of these 4 locations, along with a budget amendment in 2025 for $7,885. If you have any questions, I can sure try and answer them.
Any questions?
So the total amount that you're requesting tonight is roughly 16? Did I hear that right?
The budget amount or the budget amendment that we're requesting is just shy of $8,000, and but the engineering task order amendment is about $69,000. So increasing it from $80,000 to $149,000, which is $8,000 higher than what we had budgeted.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
If there are no questions for Jarek, what are your wishes?
I move to approve task order number 4, amendment number 1 with Moore Engineering, and authorize an additional $7,885 out of the city's sales tax fund in 2025.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Braun, a second by Commissioner Heinchan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. Item number 3, under new business, consider approval of the 2026 budget calendar. Greg?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. It's hard to believe that another budget cycle for the city is about to begin. Just seemed like we just finished one for 2025, and now we're going to be starting one for 2026. Before I present the details of the city's 2026 budget calendar, I want to provide some background information to the city's budget process. First of all, the city is required to prepare the annual budget in accordance with the North Dakota Century Code. The city's annual budget process is coordinated by the Finance Department under the direction of the Budget and Finance Committee with the assistance of commissioners, department managers, supervisors, and staff. For this agenda item, the purpose of the annual budget calendar is to provide a roadmap for the city's budget development process. There are 3 primary steps to the city's 2026 budget development process. Step 1 is to prepare, present, and approve the city's long-term plans for personnel, machinery and equipment, public facilities, and infrastructure for 2026 to 2030. Step 2 is to prepare, present, and approve the city's long-term financial plan for 2026 to 2030. And then step 3 is to prepare, present, and adopt the city's 2026 budget. The first area, long-term financial plans. Along the 2026 budget roadmap is the city's first mile marker, which is fast approaching on or around the middle of January of next year. The City Commission will be conducting a working session with department managers and engineering firms to review and discuss the preliminary long-term plans for 2026 to 2030 for personnel, machinery and equipment, public facilities, and infrastructure. In preparing for this meeting, City Administrator Neubauer will be coordinating with you commissioners and also with department managers to schedule a date and time for the working session. And it's very possible that if we can't accomplish the working session in one day, we might be looking at 2 days. Next, in February of next year, early in the month, department managers and engineering firms will present the preliminary long-term plans to the City Commission. After the presentation or during the presentation, the City Commission will need to prioritize and approve the final long-term plans for 2026 to 2030, and then direct the Budget and Finance Committee to provide funding recommendations for the working session that will occur in March of next year. Towards the end of February, the city will conduct a public information session that will present the Commission's approved long-term plans for 2026 to 2030. Moving on to the preparation of the long-term financial plan, which will begin in March of next year. Around the middle of March, the Budget and Finance Committee will review and approve the funding recommendations for the city's long-term plans. And then late in March of next year, the City Commission will conduct a second working session with department managers. At that particular working session, the Budget and Finance Committee will present the funding recommendations for the city's long-term plans for 2026 to 2030. Continuing on with the long-term financial plan, in early April of next year, the Budget and Finance Committee will review and approve funding recommendations for the preliminary long-term financial plan for 2026 to 2030, and also will be formulating guidelines for preparing the city's 2026 budget. Around the middle of April of next year, the Budget and Finance Committee will present the preliminary long-term financial plan and guidelines for preparing the 2026 budget to the City Commission. After that presentation, the City Commission will take action on that to approve the final long-term financial plan for 2026 to 2030, and also approve the guidelines for preparing the city's 2026 budget. Want to note regarding the long-term financial plan, after the City Commission approves the final long-term financial plan for 2026 to 2030, the financial plan will be updated when the spending needs for personnel, machinery, and equipment, public facilities, and infrastructure have been adjusted or revised by the City Commission, and or if there are material or significant changes in the city's revenue, expense, or fund balance projections for the same period. And now moving on to the 2026 budget development. Beginning in May of next year, the Finance Department will provide the operating budget instructions and worksheets to the department managers. These instructions are for the balance of their budget that's not salaries and benefits related, and not capital outlay related or infrastructure related, because what comes from the approved long-term financial plan, that first year of that 5-year plan will then fold right into the 2026 budget. So the other budgetary items that need to be completed would be the rest of the operating items for the respective departments. So that's what this step is here, beginning in May. At the end of May, the operating budget worksheets will be due from the department managers back to the finance department. During the month of June of next year, the finance department will review and update the revenue, expense, and fund balance projections for the 2025 budget. This is a necessary step in order to come up with better and more accurate, up-to-date fund balance projections going into the 2026 budget cycle. During July of next year, the Budget and Finance Committee will review and approve the recommendations for the city's preliminary 2026 budget. In August, first Tuesday in August of next year, the Budget and Finance Committee will present the preliminary 2026 budget to the City Commission. At that time, the City Commission will approve the introduction and first consideration and call for a public budget hearing of the ordinance adopting the 2026 budget. And then on or before August 10, the city is to provide a copy of the preliminary 2026 budget statement and notice of the public budget hearing date to the Morton County Auditor. And the last mile marker along the city's 2026 budget roadmap occurs in September of next year. The third Tuesday of that month, the City Commission will conduct a public budget hearing, and then after the public budget hearing, we'll approve the second and final consideration of the ordinance adopting the city's 2026 budget and approve the resolutions establishing the rates and charges for services for that following year. And then finally, the city is to submit a certified copy of the levy as adopted, and also a certified copy of the final 2026 budget to the Morton County Auditor no later than October 10th of next year. And with that, I will take any questions or comments that you may have.
Mayor Gregg, one thing I would suggest in looking at this, for long-term planning and budget planning process, you're talking about a day. You referred to the day, whether it be 8, 10 hour, whatever it may be. My suggestion would be that due to the intensity and the multifaceted areas here, I suggest if it's going to be a day, that we break into a half a day. That way you can be more focused. I'm a little attention deficit anyway, but that you can focus. And only that gives you some time to look back on where you're doing and where you have been and where you're going. And if it looks like it's going to be a whole day and a lot involved there, I suggest that for the convenience of mental attitudes and focus, that we break it down.
Mayor Freilich, Commissioner Rohr, those conversations have taken place because it will be a lengthy discussion. There's going to be a lot of information. You commissioners will have lots of comments and questions. And with that in mind, we probably will be looking at more than one date for the budget working session in January, to your point.
Greg, I want to go back a couple months when we approved the new policy change from a 3-year outlook to a 5.
Correct.
And if you could please elaborate on how that helps the city become more fiscally responsible.
Mayor, Commissioners, a 3-year horizon is good. A 5 is better, but a 10 is really where we need to get to eventually. The city has a lot of long-term needs that have been requested by departments. Not all of those needs all will occur in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So to begin with, we felt a 3-year planning horizon was not sufficient for the planning needs as submitted by the departments. While the city needs to really ramp up to 10 years, we really want to do well with a 5-year planning period. And once we accomplish the goal of streamlining a 5-year long-term plan, then we can graduate up to 10. The advantages of doing that is it gives the city the foresight to be able to make decisions in future years. So as we look at 2026, if the plan is to accomplish a goal that needs to occur in 2030, the city doesn't want to pass all of that cost or adjust rates all at one time. So it would behoove the city to smooth those cost allocations over multiple years. So you're not impacting the customers or the tax base all at one time. The city has a big list of items that will need to be considered. And it will go beyond 2020-30, but we need to at least get our arms around the next 5 years. There's a lot to accomplish. There's a lot of personnel needs, equipment needs, major public building needs, and infrastructure needs. The city has a lot on its plate, but in order to take manageable pieces of that and coming up with a financially prudent strategy, I think working with a 5-year planning period will serve the city well, and we'll be able to allocate those costs over that period without taking a leap all at one time. So it's good for the city to be proactive in this approach instead of reactive. But we do have a lot of catch-up to make in certain areas.
Yeah, so we heard earlier from the MPO that we approved the 2050 study. And so they're doing it already, right? And they projected the population to grow 40% within that 25 years. So if the metro area planning is already doing a 25-year outlook, we should at least do a 10, 5 to 10. And I get it, we have to build up to the 10, but I commend you for taking this on. To be fiscally responsible in these projects that you alluded to, have a life cycle from start to finish of several years, and it would be very difficult to forecast our budgets on a 3-year level. So I agree.
Mayor, Commissioners, I go back a long ways in government, and I can remember the days when government was operated 1 year at a time, for several decades or so. Then we got into 2-year planning, and what I see happening, the difference, being as I've lived those times, is there's been a lot more players within government. Your grants now, your federal government, your state government, we have a lot more players that we have to contend with and look to how we're going to develop with them over the time, along with the changing dynamics of growth that were there. So, going to the 5-year plan is moving along appropriately, and even more so beyond that if we have to.
Yep.
Mayor, fellow commissioners, Greg, the work you guys are doing is phenomenal, first of all. Second of all, being kind of a taskmaster, and I know we can't draw a line in the sand or target a specific date when you can. I'm assuming that within the 5 years you're going to kind of do some beating of the bushes, if you will, to transform your operation from a 5 to a 10-year. Do you want to finish that 5-year first and then go to the 10-year, or would there be say 1 year, 1.5 years, 3 years before 5 years eclipses that you want to start proactively putting stuff on paper for a 10-year?
Mayor Freilich, Commissioner Schoberg, I would recommend starting with a 5. We have never really put a 5-year comprehensive long-term plan together. We've had plans. They've been kind of isolated in different areas, but never in one document that collectively put together the personnel, equipment, and infrastructure needs in one financial long-term plan. This is going to be the finance department's first go-around with putting this together. So we would like to take it in manageable steps, and we feel that the initial one should at least be 5 years. But we can't stay there for very long. We need to graduate to that 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions for Greg?
Mayor and Commissioners and Greg, I did receive an email, maybe some of the others here. We did have some input from the budget hearing in September, the final consideration. There's some good public interest. One thing I'd like to just draw attention to for more discussion is if we potentially could extend that second and final consideration to closer to that August 10th, something for more discussion here in the future, but to not put us at a a hard deadline for when we need to provide that to Morton County, but maybe some more time for public discussion. That was just one note I would like to bring up for further discussion. Thank you.
Currently, there are 3 public, is that correct? 2 or 3 public opportunities to contribute. I think I put a hash mark down here. I think I came up with 3. Are those I think were always publicized in the Mandan Messenger for property owners, correct?
Mayor Freilich, Commissioner Schoberg, that is correct. Whenever there is public input into the city's budgetary process, those are advertised, those are communicated, and we use the Mandan Messenger, social media, all of the avenues of communicating to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you, Greg.
Move to approve the 2026 budget calendar.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Braun, a second by Commissioner Schoberg. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Schoberg,
Yes.
Heinchan,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes. Thank you again to the Finance Department, to Greg and Justin and their staff. On to second consideration of Ordinance 1458, a zone change from MA Industrial to CB Commercial for the Helbling 7th Edition. Andrew?
Mayor Freilich and Commissioners, Ordinance 1458 is here for a second consideration. This would rezone the Helbling 7th properties. No changes have been made, no comments have received, and our recommendation is to approve. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Andrew?
Move to approve the second consideration of ordinance 1458.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Braun, a second by Commissioner Rohr. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioners Heinchan,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Rohr,
Yes.
Schoberg.
Yes.
Mayor Freilich.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Is there any other business before the board? Hearing none. Future committee meetings, commission meetings, December 17th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. January 7th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. January 21st, 2025 at 5 p.m. As always, be kind to your neighbor, and it's onward and upward, Mandan. Meeting adjourned.